And we're moving along to chapter 6, which is your other chapter for this week. And this is um, another presentation you will listen to and be ready for the coming week. Also, this is going to be the section where we talk about self-care and wellness plan because that is in this chapter. So here again are the learning objectives. Much like we talk about in each chapter, these are the things you need to know by the time we finish the chapter. The biopsychosocial model, which we talked about in the last chapter, how you use that in counseling, the way spirituality can be infused into the counseling process, the benefits of mindfulness. So when we get together to do our work, we will actually do some experiential activities to help you understand these things, and we'll do some mindfulness together. And I think you guys will really enjoy that. Um, we're going to understand wellness counseling and wellness models and discuss the importance of prevention and ways to design stress management programs. So the biopsychosocial approach is multifaceted and looks at all areas. And so we just went over this in chapter 5. It's the bio, psycho, social, cultural, all the things that make up a human. It was proposed by Engel. He was a cardiologist. Wait a minute. What is happening? It's getting away from me. Oh. Engel was certainly ahead of his time in his ideas about looking at all the areas of a person, understanding all the dimensions. So that work really influenced counseling. In 2005, it was stated that by Kaplan and Coogan that counseling really needed a more comprehensive way to look at the client. So now it takes those three areas and helps integrate them to conceptualize cases and do the intake plan and write the treatment plan. And is now even a KCREP standard for Section 5, which is clinical mental health counseling, which is a specialization. So that's the program that you're in right now. And that's what we're doing. You are learning how to do this. You are learning what this means. You're understanding what the biopsychosocial model is. So each part of that model has a different area. And of course, the first one is biology. So we're going to go through that. So psychology. So look back in the biology. What do you notice? It's in the biology system. Oh, there's the good old limbic. Dr. Bill loves to talk about that. Look at this. This is the brain, the body, right? And then we move in to the brain, body, psychological. Psychological is thinking and emotion, perception, judgment, personality. Social, just like it sounds. Social, relationships, work, legal. And if that is fully encompassing cultural as well. And there's an acronym here. And then we get into spirituality. So let's go back and talk about biology. I hope you like biology because we're about to talk about it. So you may want to read this chapter before you listen to this because it may make more sense. The biological components are a really important part of this process. So while we're not expected to be neuroscientists, your text says, we are expected to have a good knowledge of the brain and how it works. We are usually the people who refer for medication. We are the ones who explain the brain. When you can explain what's happening in the brain, a lot of times the clients are more amenable to getting medication or doing EMDR or doing narrative therapy or trauma focused CBT, whatever it is that you're going to be doing with the client. When you can explain it from a brain lens, it makes it more normal and they understand, okay, there is something malfunctioning in my brain, like maybe perhaps neurotransmitters. The neurotransmitters in the brain are the chemicals that signal um, that signal different emotions and different um, behaviors in the brain. So neurotransmitters are produced by the glands, the pituitary and the adrenal glands. They're messengers. and they release from one neuron to another neuron. So let's take a look at a neuron so those of you who have not had this or don't know will understand that.
I will discuss the neuron. This is a brain. Estimates vary, but right now the best guess seems to be that our brains contain around 85 billion neurons. The neuron is a nerve cell, and it's the primary functional unit of the nervous system. This is a generic image of a neuron. Neurons actually come in all shapes and sizes, but this is the prototypical version of a neuron that you'll often see in the textbook. The structures extending from the left side of the neuron that look a little bit like tree branches are called dendrites. Dendrites are the area where neurons receive most of their information. There are receptors on dendrites that are designed to pick up signals from other neurons that come in the form of chemicals called neurotransmitters. Those signals picked up by dendrites cause electrical changes in a neuron that are interpreted in an area called the soma, or the cell body. The soma contains the nucleus, which contains the DNA, or genetic material of the cell. The soma takes all the information from the dendrites and puts it together in an area called the axon hillock. If the signal coming from the dendrites is strong enough, then a signal is sent to the next part of the neuron, which is called the axon. At this point, the signal is called an action potential. The action potential travels down the axon, which is covered with myelin, an insulatory material that helps to prevent the signal from degrading. The last step for the action potential is the axon terminals, also known as synaptic buttons. When the signal reaches the axon terminals, it can cause the release of neurotransmitters. These purple structures represent the dendrites of another neuron. When a neurotransmitter is released from axon terminals, it interacts with receptors on the dendrites of the next neuron, and then the process repeats with the next neuron.
Okay, so I thought those were good examples. Let's look at something with depression. So the first video showed you the neurotransmitter. Hold on. The first video showed you how the neurotransmitters would transmit to the next from one neuron to the next. So that was the first video. The second video broke down the whole neuron so that you understood what that looked like in a bigger picture. Because for those of you who've not had any kind of biology or training on neuroscience, then this would be important for you to understand and conceptualize. So let's look at let's say, depression. What happens with neurotransmitters in depression, and why do we prescribe things like antidepressants? What do they do for the neurotransmitters such as serotonin, which most antidepressants are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So they inhibit the reuptake of the serotonin, which is really responsible for a lot of mood. So let's take a peek at that.
Stressors like financial instability or a death in the family all make it more likely that a person might develop depression. So, what's actually going on in your brain? Up until recently, scientists were pretty sure that depression was caused by an imbalance of certain chemicals within the brain. Dubbed the monoamine hypothesis of depression, This theory said that a lack of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, two chemicals associated with feelings of pleasure and reward, would lead to depression. This theory is supported by a couple of things. First, scientists found that people with a particular genetic variation in the gene that codes for the serotonin receptor 5-HTT are more susceptible to depression after stressful life events when compared to people who don't have that mutation. This mutation is thought to reduce the production of serotonin receptors in the brain, leading to a decrease in serotonin signaling. There's also evidence, mostly from postmortem brains, that people with depression have changes in the dopamine signaling in their brains. Some research has found that in patients with a family history of depression, deliberately reducing levels of the proteins required to make neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine does decrease their mood. And finally, there's the fact that antidepressant medications like selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs, work. These medications function by altering the release of serotonin in the synapse, adjusting serotonin signaling throughout the brain. But scientists are no longer positive that depression is a direct result of a simple chemical imbalance. Some of the research and treatments have been inconsistent with that idea, and the condition is really complex. So researchers are also exploring a lot of other possible explanations. Brain imaging studies have found that patients with depression generally have less gray matter in several different brain regions, like the cingulate cortex, the hippocampus, and the amygdala. Gray matter, made up mostly of neuronal cell bodies, dendrites, synapses, and glia, is the place where most neuronal signaling happens. So changes in gray matter volume can affect all kinds of things, like emotions, memory, and decision.
Whoa. Hello. Sorry, guys. Oh my gosh. That came in. That came in my YouTube video. How to be able to see that. I hope those videos are helpful. I thought you can go back, of course, and watch any YouTube video or anything else that you may feel like you need to learn from. But basically, these messenger molecules or neurotransmitters, they either excite an excitatory firing response or inhibit the messages. Excitatory obviously is increasing, inhibiting is slowing down. So there's several different neurotransmitters identified, and they are known to affect mental health. They're acetylcholine, serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and gamma aminobutyric acid. And also GABA, but I don't know. They didn't put GABA on here. GABA is important as well. So these are what the neurotransmitters do. These are the different neurotransmitters and like what are they responsible for? Um, there are billions of neurons, so it makes it difficult to determine exactly what each one does, but we do know some things. So a decrease in dopamine is linked to hyperactivity and irritability. An increase. Norepinephrine, it modulates transmitters and shares some similarities with dopamine. I think we'll do some more in depth in a second, just so you guys, this is really important that you understand these things um, as you go through your program and as you get into the world of work. And of course, this is a basic overview, and you guys will continue to grow in your knowledge of this. Serotonin is an inhibitory. Remember, we talked about excitatory versus inhibitory, but it's closely associated with mood and emotion. And if you don't have enough of it, it could cause depression and anger, OCD, emotional disorders, and suicide. That selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor is inhibiting the reuptake in those neurons. Remember the reuptake where it would reuptake back into the other neuron? It's inhibiting that and slowing that, stopping that. So it will stay in the synapse longer and stabilize your mood. And then in the video, you heard her talk about the links between different antidepressants and neurogenesis, which is the ability for neurons to make new connections and learn and grow. You also saw the decrease in gray matter in places like hippocampus. When you do EMDR for 6 sessions, when you do yoga for 12 sessions, there is actual research to show that the brain surface area of the hippocampus grows by 11% after 6 EMDR sessions. And I can give you that research if you'd like it. But also yoga. We see drastic changes in the gray matter in the brain when someone goes to yoga for 12 to 14 sessions. And what is yoga doing? Well, we're going to talk about mindfulness. The breathing and the body and the mindful, calm state that's elicited from the yogic activity is calming brain and akin to a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Used in conjunction with therapy, SSRIs therapy, and something like yoga, you're going to have a really good shot at healing your depression. The limbic system, which I just mentioned, that is it's everything I talk about in the MDR. Okay, this is where the emotions are. It's so tricky. It's on both sides. It's underneath the thalamus, and the thalamus is the timekeeper. Just under the cerebrum, it includes hypothalamus, hippocampus, amygdala, and several other nearby areas. Our emotional life and memory formation is in this area, which is why I talk about it so much with EMDR. Because what happens is we store the memories on this side of the brain in the limbic. They stay stuck there. And if you are reliving your trauma or in a trigger moment where you are in fight or flight, you're essentially in limbic. And what EMDR does is brings on left brain, actually brings on medial prefrontal cortex, which is a higher order thinking. It's able to look at the limbic and say, hey, the threat has passed. But when you live in limbic and it's lit up and you're in trauma, you are unable to get up to MFPC. Your brain is broken. You can't get up to the medial prefrontal cortex to make sense of what you're doing. Essentially, when you live in limbic, this is what it's like. If you're walking along and you see a snake, you would jump back. That's your limbic. It's important. The limbic keeps us alive, right? If a tiger is running down the street, the limbic's going to be like, oh, blank, 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 and we're going to haul it because the tiger's going to eat us, perhaps. We don't run around from tigers now, but we still jump back from snakes. More of the threats that we encounter today are social, right? They're social threats. They're not threats that an animal is going to eat us or a bear in a cave, etc. It's more, I was going to say in the Black Plague, but hey, it's different times we're living in now. But if we jump back, it's good, right? Limbic's like, ooh, bad, danger, not good. It immediately gives us this innate fear response of a slithery snake because that's passed down ancestrally to protect us. And so you jump back and you're like, and then you stop and you look and you breathe. Oh, it's a stick. The part of the brain that allowed you to know that it was the stick was the prefrontal cortex, the medial prefrontal cortex. It's like, oh, okay, no threat. Move on, pick up stick if you'd like. Look at this cool stick. Looks like a snake. And the threat is past. When you are in a traumatized brain, a depressed brain, an anxious brain that doesn't seem to stabilize, everything is a snake without the ability to get up there to see if it's really a stick or not. Now, expand that to social threat. So, people, places, things, right, can determine whether it's a real or perceived threat. So, over the course of several sessions of not just EMDR, but also CBT and yoga and other modalities, mindfulness, meditation, the brain is able to stabilize and get into a different brain state and bring on and be able to communicate with that part of the brain to calm brain down. It's like if you had a watchtower in your brain and you were able to climb up and there's smoke and you can't see anything and you can't breathe and you're like, where do I go? How do I get out of here? And you can't figure it out. That's when you're stuck in limbic. But when you can get up to medial prefrontal cortex, it's like climbing up a watchtower and being able to view around and say, okay, there's the way to go that's safe. That was probably way too much information. Wow, I'll look at the screen. Genetics. We already talked about genetics and environment quite a lot, but we know that genetic component is important as well as the environmental influence of different conditions. But the genetics, we know there's a link for all of these, and we even now knowing there's a link for trauma. We're knowing that there's predisposition for brain changes and offspring of Holocaust survivors, 9/11 survivors. So we are now, in the past 5 to 8 years, just new research, and I do a presentation on it. Fascinating. But if mom and dad are anxious, we're more likely to be anxious. Mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, bipolar, we're more likely to be bipolar. Schizophrenia, etc. Alcoholism, of course, addiction. But we know that environmental factors actually activate the genes in conditions because there's twin studies for which one twin is raised in they both came from, predisposition for substance abuse, and one's raised in maybe an abusive home or not a great home, or one's raised in a great home, and they're identical twins, and only one of them has issues. So we know, even with schizophrenia, we know someone can be predisposed to a lot of these conditions, and the genes are not activated because the conditions don't activate them. It's kind of like Rat Park. I showed Rat Park in all the classes, so now I'm trying to. Yes, I did show you Rat Park. Yes, I did. Johan Hari, I hope. Um, Rat Park, right? And they didn't drink the cocaine water because they were in Rat Park. That's their environment. So really powerful, really important to understand. Well, let's go to psychological. And I like to kind of go back and reduce to make sure you guys can see the whole slide. I apologize for that. This is and you guys can kind of let me know how that's going for you guys when we get back together next week. No, wait, we're not going to see each other for another week. Man, I think I'll probably try to be on Teams for you guys. Oh yes, hold on. Yes, Grayson.
Means we'll watch the Magic School Bus.
Magic School Bus. Okay,
Can
let
we
me
get
pause
where's
this.
the phone?
So I got a little caught up in the brain, but the important thing is remember the biopsychosocial model. So we just did the bio. What's the family history? What is going on with this person biologically, and looking at all of those components. And then we have the psychological components, which include different things, right? The patterns of thinking, how do they cope? Are they able to cope? Judgment. What's their judgment like? How are they handling things in their life? How are they judging what to do or not do? How are they concentrating? What is their emotional intelligence? What are their perceptions of what's happening in their life? What's their temperament? Are they very enraged? Are they completely depressed and just despondent? And these go hand in hand. psych and bio go back and forth, right? So if you are biologically, if there's an issue, it's affecting psych affecting bio and social, right? So they are all cyclical and they work together. That's what EMDR helps me to look at, which is we work on everything. We work on the thought, the feeling, and the body, which is the bio, because we store stuff in our bodies, because we have a dorsal vagus nerve that connects gut and head, brain and gut, and tendrils that come out of this nerve that give us sweaty palms, etc. And we know that they're all intermingled together. Social personality, of course, is in the psychological, both personality. Then social, family, support, our work relationships, our cultural environment, our cultural identity. What are people going through? What is perhaps the systemic racism that they've encountered? How, as a woman, have they been marginalized? How have they been treated? What's happened to them? Other issues like reproductive issues, that's a huge trauma for people, and it's very something that needs to be attended to. Um, in vitro, it's very stressful for people. Loss of babies, miscarriages, family issues, socio-political conditions. Um, so all of those are assessed through the BPS model. And an approach that enables us to access all the domains is the BATHE technique, BATHE, whatever. It's BATHE, all right? And it's an acronym. Make that bigger so you can see it. BATHE. It's in your text. You just memorize it. B is background, which examines the biological, psychological, social factors. A is affect, their emotional state. Affect, emotion, memorize that, because I remember starting and going, what is an affect intolerance? What is that? What does that mean? So affect is a word that we use a lot. We throw it around a lot. If you don't know what it means, you get lost when you're listening to people talk, because it's a big counseling word. Affect state. What's their affect? It's in the mental status exam. So it's just their emotional state. What's their affect? Trouble. What's the problem? What are they there for? What did they come in for? What are they identifying as their issue? Handling. How are they able to cope? What are their support systems? You always want to assess what is their coping style, how are they able to cope, and what are they doing that helps, what works, and who do they have? And sometimes people have no one, and it helps you to know how to proceed and what kind of suicidal risk they are, etc. If they have zero support. Empathy, conveying that you are there, that you are supporting them and you're meeting them where they are. This goes through all of the questions for you so that you understand how to do this type of assessment. It gives you the questions and tells you how you should empathize. I mean, this sounds really tough. You are dealing with some really challenging things. We usually work with a team depending on where you work, and this type of assessment is really important for you to understand how to do. Usually it's formalized, which you have the intake packet where they fill a lot of this out, and then you go back and go over it. When we get back together, we'll go over a case where we can look at this in more in depth so you can apply it to an actual case. Craving the spirituality. It is a value that many Americans have. There's a long tradition of including it as an important dimension of human life, and look at who all we have here. Viktor Frankl, of course, Maslow, Adler, Rollo May, and Carl Jung. And you see that you're studying those in your other class, and those are theorists who've made sure that this is included and is an important part of therapy. It's not always been embraced by mental health professionals, but more and more we have paid more attention to spirituality, especially mindfulness, and there's research to back up what we're doing. So some of the naysayers are kind of perhaps coming around because there's some data So there's an actual definition of spirituality, and we always go from the spiritual, not the religious, right? We incorporate what the client wants, but spiritual tenets have their spirituality. There's a commonality of spirituality across many religions, with love and meaning and peace and hope and transcendence and connectedness, compassion. Spirituality includes things like growth and creativity and the development of a value system. So we talk about those things. Really important that you understand that those should be a part of what you're doing, and if at all possible. Those are parts of what we do as therapists. It's very different than religion. See if I want to say anything else about that. So, in the past 2 decades, there's been more attention to spirituality. I think I said that, but I wanted to make sure I pointed this out. Gold in 2010, he had 3 reasons for this increased attention. And they're A, more positive professional receptivity to spirituality, an acknowledgement of spirituality and religion as a multicultural variable, so much so, right? Think about um, your African American client who comes in. I'm teaching that in another class. Who the church is such an integral part of a lot of their lives, and being able to incorporate that. A greater client demand for religion and spirituality. Um, he cites another article that says all humans are spiritual. Spirituality affects mental, physical, and emotional health, and it is essential to address those issues in therapy to maintain ethical care. And religion is very different than spirituality. It's organized by people. It expresses spiritual beliefs, but religiosity is often conceptualized as having more organizational behavioral components, where spirituality is considered to be oriented toward personal experiences and may be transcendent in nature. There's a growing body of research that expresses um, lots of positive links between well-being, mental health, and spirituality. Um, so it is something that we definitely need to look at incorporating. I incorporate mindfulness into what I do. Dr. Powers is trained in mindfulness in CBT, and I use mindfulness with EMDR. A lot of people in the practice that my practice do. So mindfulness was really born out of a Buddhist um, philosophy, but has evolved and can be done in conjunction with any religion. So it's really meditation, right? Just meditation, and that can be done in any way that the client would like it to be done. Of course, only if the client would like it to be done. So yeah, you can't say. I mean, you can definitely say that you want to try this, and then if the client definitely does not want to do that, you would not do it. So anyway, we're going to do this in class. I'm going to lead you through some mindfulness activities after we do our case study when we get back together. So I've got my little list here of all the things that we're going to do after we do some assessments also from the last chapter. So we will actually do some things and make sure you're making notes for questions and things when we get back together. And I do think I'm going to hop on tomorrow night at 5:15 again, even though this is the online week, just so if you need to see my face and you need to ask me questions or and I can meet with you guys at any time. I think I'm getting off track, but if you're like, hey, Dr. Bill, can we just meet for 20 minutes and talk face to face about something in the material that's unclear? I will be more than happy to do whatever you guys need to do. I know this is a very different semester, and we're just all getting through. Okay, let's see. Mindfulness, one of my favorite things to talk about, right? Um, it helps us pay attention to the here and now in a non-judgmental manner. The way that you do that is things come up and you don't judge that they're coming up. We're gonna have thoughts. When we're dead, we won't have thoughts, but I guess. But we have thoughts that come constantly, and it's now just more of a practice, and it's not religious, etc. Exactly. It can. It is amazing what mindfulness can do. It reduces stress, treats depression, treats chronic pain, treats substance abuse, and a myriad of other issues, including ADHD. We can practice formally or informally. Your professor here, Dr. Reel, has been trained in mindfulness and is actually in another training right now for it at night once a week. Mindfulness means fully attending in an unbiased, curious manner to what one is experiencing. The three core building blocks of mindfulness includes intention, being practicing with purpose, attention, paying attention to what's going on in the moment, and attitude, observing from a non-judgmental manner. Being aware of experiences without filters or distortions and not criticizing yourself for what's coming into your mind. Being intentionally mindful is the opposite of living on autopilot. When we're on autopilot, we're not in control. We're not aware of what's going on. We can't self-regulate our minds. Practitioners describe mindfulness as a way to train the puppy mind, a mind that's in constant motion. This is a really simplified way, but let's look at this. The anchor is often our breath. Breathe in, hold, breathe out, hold, hold out, breathe in, hold in, breathe out, hold out. Breathe in and out right now as we're doing this and just say a positive word like relax. Perhaps you take a moment, close your eyes, and breathe. When practicing mindfulness meditation, you always set a timer. It seems so silly that that's the biggest thing I got out of my training. One of was, oh, goodness, that makes sense. Don't just sit there and be like, okay, like how much longer should I do this? But set 2 minutes on your phones and do that now. Pause me and take a minute and set 2 minutes on your phone and breathe. You can do box breathing like I taught you in class and I was just doing on here. Or you can just deeply breathe in and out and think of a positive word. Now, the thing with mindfulness is if you can't do it, or if things are coming in like crazy, the whole point is for you to notice those things without judging. Oh, okay, I said, okay, this is stupid. All right. Can't believe Dr. Beals making us do it though, right? I have so much to do. Why am I doing this right now? Whatever it is, but not judging it and just noticing it. And the more and more practice you have, the more and more aware you are, and the more likely you are to be able to get into this brain state. It was really fantastic. You can also read how to do that on page 161. So let's talk about wellness. We've talked about Myers, Sweeney, and Whitmer in our theories book. So he was big into Adlerian and talking about the wellness wheel, and that's the model of wellness, and that's going to be in your text. It's a holistic approach to counseling, which includes the spiritual and wellness, so it's biopsychosocial, then the wellness parts. So they have a definition there, and wellness-based counseling is salutogenic. It's health enhancing, and we do know that, right? We know that it's that's a definition to know, but it involves all dimensions of health and wellness. And wellness-based counseling has evolved and very, very much a part of what I do in conjunction with EMDR, right? I look at the whole person. So there's actual models of counseling-based wellness, and we're going to start on that on 163. This is something you've already been introduced to, but I think really, really important for you to understand it comprehensively. It's rooted in individual psychology. So individual psychology comes from where? Do y'all remember? In theories, Adlerian. This is where you've seen this, right? I've said that just a second ago, but this is really important that you see where it came from, because this wellness is rooted in an Adlerian approach to understanding individuals from that holistic perspective, kind of the opposite of Freud. You can look at the figure and follow along on page 164. So the wellness wheel has 5 major life tasks. the spirituality, self-direction, work and leisure, friendship and love. And spirituality is the center of the wheel and is considered the most important component of well-being. 12 subtasks associated with the 5 major tasks are listed in the spokes of the wheel: sense of worth, sense of control, realistic beliefs, emotional awareness and coping, problem solving and creativity, sense of humor, nutrition, exercise, self care, stress management, gender identity, and cultural identity. Then life tasks are life forces: family, community, education, religion, and government. And life forces and life tasks are influenced by external global factors, both natural, like catastrophic events, and human. The wheel of wellness is theoretical in nature, but statistical analysis do support its structure. There's a study, and they use findings from those analyses to devise an empirically supported model of wellness called the Indivisible Self ISWEL model, which is the second thing on this slide. Also grounded in Adlerian. And we can use the model to help clients assess personal wellness and evaluate choices that they make to enhance wellness. It offers a structure to our counseling, supports caregivers of persons with dementia by mobilizing their strengths, improving their coping, and enhancing overall well-being, as an example. So it consists of global wellness, 5 secondary order factors, 17 third order factors, and 4 contextual factors. So you see those right there on page 164. And then how do you use it? So what do you do with us? Like, this is great information, right? But what, now what, right? Now look, we're almost done, guys. So hang with me. We only got 23 slides here. So, and we're on 19. So take a breath and pause me if you need to wake up. But this is how you use the indivisible self model, which again is the wellness wheel that has been validated and is now the indivisible self model. How do you do it? So first you introduce the wellness model to the client. So you introduce it, you tell them what it is, you describe the model, you use the drawing. I pull the drawing of things out a lot for people to see, and there's no secret. We want them to know. And find the connection between healthy living and overall well-being is discussed. Then you assess the wellness components. You administer the 5-factor wellness inventory. So here's an assessment. The 5-factor wellness inventory. The results are shared with the client, and then you look at the levels of functioning in those areas of wellness. Clinicians encourage clients to look at their scores and see if they match their personal perception of how they're doing and what decisions need to be made to strengthen. Then we develop a personal wellness plan. This can be conducted together or on their own as homework. Use the information from the assessment to figure out how they're going to work on their wellness. The wellness plan should include objectives for change, how to accomplish that, and resources to facilitate it. So what resources will they need to make those changes? The plans for evaluation and follow-up is a strategy that's implemented, and you're looking at how are we going to evaluate, how are we going to see if we're making our goals. Okay, so as you know, we've been evaluating and changing the program a lot. And so you'll read in your text how useful this can be in counselor education programs. So as a part of your self-care reflection, I'm going to have you do your own wellness plan. Don't pay attention to the percentage right there. It's going to go along just with the self-care reflection. This is such a very, very, very important part of what we do. And so this is something that I've got a rubric and I've got this for you. This is what I want you to do for part of your self-care plan. And we're going to talk more about self-care. I think I'm going to do just another little presentation for you this week so you'll be ready. And I think I have you submitting it before we come back together on the 28th so that we can talk about it in class. I've been kind of playing around with how we're going to do this, but this is part of the assignment that I'm adding to your reflection, and I'm going to put this in Connect. So, but here it is. I'm also going to add it as a key performance indicator for portfolio because I think, and don't ignore VIA. I'm going to rewrite this for you, but just so you kind of know, it's to help you with your own personal approach to wellness and design a plan for how you'll maintain wellness throughout the program and your career. The domains covered in this assignment include how are you going to stay healthy physically, mentally, relationally, spiritually, and professionally. You will need to identify 2 goals for each of the above domains. You will need to create steps toward achieving each primary goal by creating short-term, mid-term, and long-term objectives that tie into the goal. Whereas goals and objectives can include other people, fulfillment of the goals and objectives can depend on others' willingness to participate. This assignment should be written similar to a treatment plan, where each goal is well written and SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and bound to time. The scoring rubric for this assignment is going to be put in Connect, and a well-designed wellness plan with your self-care reflection will be worth full credit. So you can use your text here. I wanted to link them together so you're like, wait, what is she talking about? So go here, and even if you want to get crazy, you could do the wellness inventory if you can find it. I haven't looked for it, but I think you might be able to find that for free. So we can take a peek at that as well in a little bit. So wahoo, that's exciting. Let me also pull up, I can also pull up the rubric. So remember, anytime you're doing anything with assignments for us, especially key performance indicators, most of them have a rubric. And the rubric tells you exactly what to do. So here, it's going to tell you, oh, meet expectation, above expectations, meet expectations, below. So this is this wellness plan assignment that I've been trying to incorporate. So I'm excited. And the thing is, you guys will get to do this again later on at the end of your program. And you can look back and go like, oh, that's not even something I want to do anymore. Or I met all my goals. Or that wasn't something that worked for me. It'll be really important for your career and how to say, well, people are constantly asking me, how do you do what you do? And I say, I have a really good self-care plan, a real good wellness plan. And I have to change it and it ebbs and flows. And there's times my life is cray cray. But there are times where I'm really balanced and I worked hard to achieve that balance in my life. And how do I do that? Is be ever mindful of wellness and in tune with who I am. All right, prevention. And let's get started. Prevention is a big part of what we do as a cornerstone of wellness. Anything we could do to prevent. Um, so let's talk about the different kinds of primary prevention is before the fact. That's before it's even happened. Secondary is targeting toward people at risk of developing a mental health problem. And tertiary is efforts to alleviate a problem or making it from getting even further. So these are different models of prevention. Here are some actual models of prevention. We have the configural equation, which is increasing strengths and decreasing limitations, increase social support, decrease social stress, and enhance environmental resources is what we do. This is part of what we do, right? It's really, really important that we try to prevent further digression into mental health issues or suicidality or something like that, right? We're preventing what we're doing, a lot of prevention in our wellness work and incidence formula where we bolster coping, self-esteem, and support, and recognize power and powerlessness. This is all I do in EMDR, and I see people heal from a multitude of things with no issues in the future. Okay, stress management. Okay, it's so important. This is in conjunction with our wellness field. Stress, it impacts everything, all areas of our life. There's a formal definition by Lazarus and Folkman. This is funny because I used it in my dissertation. It describes stress as a particular relationship between the person and environment that is appraised by the person as taxing or exceeding his or her resources, endangering his or her well-being. Perceptions of what is stressful vary widely among individuals, with some people viewing certain events as quite stressful and others as being not affected. So stress management is so important, and that's what we're doing. We're teaching coping. Mindfulness helps stress. Wellness evaluation helps stress. Yoga helps stress. Therapy helps stress. Medicine helps stress. How are they dealing with their problems? CBT helps stress. Time management helps stress. So how are we going to help people reduce stress? Because we know that stress is what causes the majority of our health issues in heart um, issues and other issues caused from stress. So we know they have a biological effect. We also have this huge psychological effect, and that's our job to help people reduce stress in with us and learn how to manage their stress. Particular importance is the huge stressors on marginalized, vulnerable populations and making sure that we understand how to help them as best we can. Um, that's the bottom of 170. Okay, we did it. And I'm going to talk more in another presentation about self-care. I'm going to skip around a little bit, so if you want to keep following with me, you're going to go, what is this? Yeah, we're going to do a little bit into the next chapter now, just in prep for your wellness plan and for your self-care reflection. That's going to be on page 210 to 216. So just a little bit extra for this week, okay? And I'm going to change out in the syllabus and also make sure you know an email. All right, hope y'all are having a good week. Bye.